Hello, Mike Pennacchi with NetAlly here, and in this session we're going to go through the art of discovering your network. So what I want to do is just make sure that we are, let me see here, let me just stop sharing my screen for just a second and bring this up because I want to do a little introduction here and talk about what we're going to be going through in this webcast. So no PowerPoint slides, no dry stuff. This is going to all be live demos. We'll see how it goes. You know, there's always a chance that something goes sideways with that, but hey, that's real life. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how we use the NetAlly EtherScope nXG to discover the network. In previous webcasts, I've gone through the details of how that device discovers the network. We took a look at Wireshark traces, etc. Today, we're going to look at how we go in and set up the discovery, discover our network, and then upload that to Link Live. And within Link Live, we are going to be able to generate a topology map of our network. So I'm pretty excited about this. In doing some videos recently, I spent a considerable amount of time going through the discovery process and getting this all set up. Now, I'm going to drop down the question window here. There is a question window. I am a question-driven person. This is a live webinar. It's a great time to ask questions about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this over here, make it a little easier to see the questions. I'm going to do my best to get through every question that you have as we go through here. So I'll talk for a while, show you some things. I'll pause. I'll look at questions. We'll come back to those. We'll make sure that we get those addressed. All right, so with that, let's go over here and take a look at the piece of equipment we're going to be using. So here we have the EtherScope nXG. So this is an Android-powered device. I've got it on my little stand right here. We've got a number of interfaces on this. Up here on the top, I have a 10100, 1000, 2.5, 5, and 10 gig interface. I've got a SFP plus slot right here that supports 1 gig and 10 gig. I've got a USB port. I've got an external antenna connector. Over here on the side, we've got a wired management port. We're going to be using that wired management port to remote this, or to remote control this device. So today, we are going to be focusing on how we use the EtherScope nXG to discover our network. So the setup I've got it plugged into a wired connection on my network, and we're going to use the wired connection to do the discovery. And what I want to do is show you why we want to use either the wired interface or the management interface to do the discovery. And then we're going to kind of let the Wi-Fi card run wild on here. And it's going to give us some information that very few, I'm going to say no other tools could give us about what's on our network and how it's connected. So with that, let's go ahead and we're going to jump over and I'm going to share my screen here. So up here on my screen, we have the EtherScope nXG over here on the left. We have Link Live over here on the right. So in this case, we can go in and we're going to take a look at Link Live in just a minute, but I want to focus first on the EtherScope nXG. Now, on the EtherScope nXG, we have a number of applications. So this is an Android system. We can go in and load up not only the apps that come with this, but we can load up a variety of other apps from the NetAlly App Store. So these are apps that have been vetted. I think the last time I looked, there were over 300 apps out there. I can do things like connect a Bluetooth keyboard to this. I've connected barcode scanners, all kinds of things. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to start out by coming up here to our auto test. Now our auto test is how we connect the network port up there on the top to our network. And I can come in and I can configure this. I can have this test PoE. I can specify a 802.1q VLAN tag if I wanted to connect to a different VLAN. Now in this case, I'm going to hit start. Now you're probably saying, Mike, how are you connected into this? Well, the EtherScope nXG supports two ways to connect in remotely. One way is through Link Live. And this is a really cool way because let's say that I've got a EtherScope nXG out at one of my remote sites, and the tech out there has some questions about what they're seeing on the screen. I can go into Link Live and control it remotely through Link Live. That way, no matter where they're at, because the EtherScope nXG is going to connect out to the internet, Link Live is going to come in from the internet, and the two of them are going to be able to talk. The other way I can do that is using VNC. So I have VNC loaded up on my PC, and I am VNC'd into the management port on the EtherScope nXG. Now, why am I using VNC instead of Link Live? Because this way it makes it easier for me to show both screens at the same time. So what I've done is I've just connected to my network using that network port. So I can see that I've got a variety of different VLAN tags. I've tagged VLANs on here. Tells me what switch and port I'm connected to. I can see my DHCP address, my DNS, and a variety of other devices that are out there. So once I get connected to the network right there, and in fact, let me just grab my EtherScope. I'm going to tap on the screen here. I can drill into information about the switch I'm connected to. I'll go back. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the home screen right here, and we're going to jump into the Discovery app. We're going to see what it's discovered. Now, one little thing I want to point out before I do that, if we look up here in the upper left-hand corner, we see a number rolling through. It's incrementing, and then it starts over again. That is the Wi-Fi test port. So that is an 802.11 AC 4x4 radio that's going out there and it's scanning all of our wireless channels. It is not connected to any one of these channels. It is scanning these channels, and it is collecting information about which Wi-Fi devices are associated to each of my different access points. And this is really important because normally if I just do a network discovery on my wired network, I can see who's out there. But by combining this wireless information and pivoting on the MAC address, we're going to see that this allows us to go in and discover not only the devices on our wired network, but the devices on our wireless network and where those devices are connected. Okay? Now, this is not a special port that I have the EtherScope nXG plugged into. This is just a switch port on one of my VLANs. So let's go in, and I'm going to select Discovery. And before we start getting into what all is in our discovery, I'm going to come up and I'm going to tap on my little menu in the upper left-hand corner. And from here, I can come into my discovery settings. So let's take a look at a few of our different discovery settings in here. The first one is Snmp version 1 and version 2. So the EtherScope nXG supports Snmp version 1, 2, and 3. So if I'm only using 3 and I don't ever want to see any 1 and 2 on there, I could turn that off. I could turn off Snmp. If I do have Snmp turned on, I can come in here and set my community strings. Now, okay, I've gotten lazy. My community string is public. And it really shouldn't be, but I'm really kind of the only one on this network, so I don't sweat it too much. But please, on your network, do not use public and private. That's not the best way to go there. So we're going to go back. In Snmp v3, we can set credential sets, passwords, what type of encryption we're using, etc. So I can set all that up. Now I'm going to come down a little bit more. And before I leave Snmp, it is so important that when we're using discovery, when we want to discover our network, we must have Snmp capable switches and routers. This is critical. I see people buying these little unmanaged switches and throwing them in around their network. Stop doing that. That is making doing things like discovery impossible. I can tell you that there's a bunch of devices out there, but I can't tell you what port they're on. With this, I can get it down to which port each device is connected to when we're looking at remote sites and things like that. And it makes it so much easier for troubleshooting those problems. Now, if I come into active discovery ports, we can turn discovery on all 4 of the possible ports. Our wired port, our Wi-Fi port. These are our 2 test ports. We can turn it on our management port and our Wi-Fi management port as well. For today, I just have it turned on the Wi-Fi port. So we're going to come back. We're going to cancel out of there. We're going to drag this up a little bit. Now, extended ranges. With our extended ranges, this is where we can go in and we can select which off-broadcast subnets we want to discover. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. We're going to come into extended ranges, and we can see that I've put in a number of subnets in here. Now, the 10.0.0, 10, these are all my subnets. So I went in and added those in as part of my discovery. In fact, I could even hit the little plus button down there in that floating action button, and I could use this as a way to go in and put in a subnet where I wanted to add in a subnet I wanted to discover. Now, one of the things that's kind of slick, and if we slide down here, what we're going to see is here's some other subnets, and I have those unselected. These are subnets for a client of mine. And what I've done is when I want to go in and discover what's on their network, I have a little VPN router. I plug that VPN router into my network. I then plug the EtherScope nXG into that VPN router. I go through the VPN into their network. So I could literally discover a network anywhere in the world just by establishing a VPN connection with that network. So there are some powerful things. Now, we really can't VPN in from the network interface of the EtherScope nXG. So I found to accomplish that, I really need to go in and plug that into like a VPN router. But we can put in as many extended discovery ranges as possible. Now be careful. You don't want to put in 10.0.0.0 with a /8 subnet mask. This will send out 16 million plus pings searching for all those. So we want to be a little bit careful here. But this is a fantastic way to discover beyond our local broadcast domain. So let me just take a look here. I just want to take a look at a couple of questions. So which port, one of the questions, which port is best to plug into for discovery? The network port or the management port? So I'll tell you, one of the things when it comes to discovery, the difference between those two when it comes to discovery, VLAN tag. So I tend to go toward the wired port, which supports 802.1q VLAN tagging. So if I did want to switch which VLAN it was on, makes it easy to do through the auto test. We could just as easily do this discovery through the wired port or through the wired management port at the same time. All right. So just a comment about extended ranges can also be used to restrict who we're talking to. So if we come over here and we click on our little dots right here, we can go in and we can narrow this down with who we're talking to as well. So let's go in, and if I selected this range right here, we can use the or we can select whether it's active or not in there. Okay? So this gives us a lot of capabilities as far as being able to go in and discover our network. And we can drill this down to a 32-bit subnet mask. So I can come in and say, I just want to discover this device over there to get the Snmp information. So now I've come in, I've set up my extended discovery ranges. We're going to come down here. We can take a look at our refresh interval. So every 90 minutes, this is going to go through and rediscover everything. And that's not a bad interval. I find I rarely ever have to change that. My device health interval. So every 10 minutes, the EtherScope nXG is going to go out to each device that has Snmp on it and say, how you doing? How are those interfaces of yours? And it's going to look at the health of those devices. We can do things like change our ARP sweep rate if we want to slow it down. I find that that's really useful for doing things like security audits where I don't want somebody to really see that I'm out there doing it. We can set up some AP grouping rules. We can slow down Snmp queries if we're dealing with some really old switches and routers. So once we get our discovery configuration set up, I'm going to come back here. It starts discovering my network. Now we see that on my little network right here, we've discovered 94 devices. So up there at the top, we see discovery. We've got our 94 devices out there. I can see I've got my Raspberry Pi, some Raspberry Pis out there, my PBX, I've got a NAS server, I've got a bunch of different devices. But also, I have a lot of devices that just have IP addresses. Now, Discovery uses DNS, it uses SNMP, it uses MDNS to go out and try and discover the names of these devices. But some devices, like 10.0.0.87 is a IP camera I have, it's just not going to put a name on that for me. So what I can do, let's grab that one. I can select that, and we see what port and switch that's connected to. And this is the beautiful thing with this discovery, is it's using the bridge forwarding tables off of the routers and switches. Primarily the switches on the bridge forwarding table, route tables on routers. But it's going out and it's grabbing that. It's finding the MAC address of this device. It's running a calculation on that, and it's saying, look, that device is connected to port gig 2 of the attic switch, and it's on VLAN 10. I know exactly where that device is connected. Now, what we'll see is down in the lower right-hand corner, we've got a little tools icon down there. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. These are all of the different tools that I can use to work with that device. I can do a path analysis. I can trace a path at layer 2 and layer 3 to that device. I can ping it. I can do a TCP port scan. I can do a packet capture. I can browse to it. The one we're going to focus on today for the art of network discovery is name and authorization. So I can come into name and authorization, and I can give that a name. And I can say, that's the front door camera. So we're going to make my life easy on me. Instead of using the keypad, I'm going to say front door camera. Now I'm going to say that's authorized. That's a device on my network. That's one of my devices. So I'll say, okay. So now we've given it a descriptive name, and we've authorized that device on our network. So I'm going to come back. So we see that now it says front door camera. That makes sense. That's a name I can deal with. I don't have to remember the IP addresses anymore. So what it's done is it's associated that name with that MAC address right there. Now if we continue to scroll down, we see that some devices, like 10.0.0.162, 10.0.0.162 is a Wi-Fi device. It's got a Wi-Fi icon next to it. So I'm going to select that device. And what this does is this tells me a few things about this device. It tells me the IP address of that device. It tells me its MAC address. It tells me which AP it's connected to. So I've got an AP right up here in the ceiling. That device is connected to that AP. Now that AP has multiple SSIDs on it, and it's telling us that it is using Netgear 77 5G. It's using WPA2 personal, and it tells us what our nearest switch is. So now it tells me what AP that device is connected to. How? Because it's scanning the Wi-Fi network at the same time it's looking at the wired network, and it's putting that together because the MAC address on the wired side is the same as the MAC address on the Wi-Fi side. In fact, if I came in and I tapped on that MAC address, now I've just moved from the Discovery app over to the Wi-Fi app. So now this is giving me the Wi-Fi information about that device. I can see signal strength, I can see retries, I can see all my RF information about that. Now, if you've been using the EtherScope nXG to do any discovering, and you've seen local admin show up in a MAC address, you've probably gone, what is that, Mike? Because what I'm seeing is a lot of times it tells me the manufacturer, it gives me my organizationally unique identifier, and it puts that with a name. But what's this local admin? What you'll find is, as a security tool for a lot of phones and tablets and other devices these days, they randomize the MAC address. So what they're doing is they're going in and they set the locally administered MAC address bit in the MAC address. And there's a bit in the first 6 bytes. And that bit tells us what is this, a locally administered or globally administered address. If that bit is set to locally administered, we put local admin in there. That tells us that that address was generated by the device, and that address will change. So this can make giving names to phones and tablets much more challenging, because you're going to find that these change. You could go through and add names, but if you add a name to a device that says local admin, the odds are really good that at some point that is going to change. So I went through that. I went in on my phones and so on here, turned the randomization off. But they can, if they're collecting MAC addresses from stores and things like that, they can really even start tracking you as far as what stores you go to by looking at your MAC address on your phone. So there's some reasons for going in and randomizing that. But that's just a little local admin one. I've seen that. It is kind of bothersome sometimes. But there is a Wi-Fi device, and we can see where that Wi-Fi device is connected. It is just a really slick way to be able to come in and do that. Now, let's say I want to find an IP address. I can come in, tap on my search icon right up here, and I can type in a name or an IP. I could say 10.0.0.43. That's one of my color printers that I use for printing. So I'll select that. Boom, there's my printer. It tells me it's connected to the storeroom switch, interface gig 6. Tells me that it's been up for 1 week, 22 hours. So I can search on name, I can search on IP address, I can search on MAC address, I can search on all those things. Now, with 94 devices, I may want to filter down on the devices that I see. So in this case, what I can do is I can click on my little filter icon right there, and these are the different categories I can use for filtering. So I could say I want to filter on IP subnets. So this shows me all the IP subnets I've discovered. I'd say, you know what, for the studio in here, I want to stick with the studio. So I'm going to go with 10.0.11. So if I go back, now it just shows me those devices here in the studio. So this makes it easy to drill into a specific subnet, especially if I'm discovering outside of my local broadcast domain. I could turn that off. Uta, that works with me, connects to my office via a VPN. So she is on 10.0.12. So I can select her subnet right here. I can go back, and now this shows me the devices she has at her office. So let's say that I had some questions about the backup NAS. So I've got a duplicate NAS down there for backing up my files. I could select the backup NAS, and I don't have to tell Uta to trace the cable from the NAS to the switch, I can see that it's connected to port 8 of that switch at her office. So this makes it much easier for troubleshooting remote sites and seeing what's going on out there. Now, oops, one back too far. So we've discovered devices. Now, as I'm going through and giving devices names and authorizing them, one little trick that I do is I will come in here and I will go into Authorization. And this shows me how many devices have been authorized. So we have one authorized devices. So what I'll do is I'll select Unspecified and I will filter on that. These are every device that I have not authorized on my network. I will start working through this list. Every time I come into a device like the storeroom switch, and I go into Name and Authorization, and I say Authorized, I'm happy with the name that it found. Now, when we go back, we're down to 92 of 94. So it's a process. But as we give those devices names, we are not having to try and figure out what that device is every time. Now, this name to MAC address information is stored in a file called authname.txt. And this file is stored on the EtherScope nXG. So what we're going to do is we're going to come out to the home screen. I am going to go to my file manager. I am going to go to my EtherScope settings, and there's auth name right there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to delete that file. Then I'm going to come over here to my SD card, and I'm going to grab an auth name file that I've already created. I'm going to copy that. To that directory. So I got rid of the default one. I brought in one I've already created. Now, just as good measure, we're going to restart the EtherScope nXG. So it'll come back here in just a second. But I'm going to restart it, and when I restart it, it's going to open up that new auth name file. So while it's doing that, let me just come in here. I'm going to come over to my questions. Is IPv6 possible? Not right now. Will discovery show different subnets discovered so you can add them to scan further, or do you have to know what networks to add beforehand? So we'll go back in and look at our extended discovery ranges, but what the EtherScope nXG does is it will go out and talk to our routers and get the next hop subnets. So it puts together a list of subnets. So it will give us a list of subnets that it's discovered through the routers. We can then select those subnets and add them to discovery. So it's not necessary to know every subnet, but we can go in and choose those subnets that have been discovered by discovery. With Link Live, can a remote user connect in if the nXG is connected via Wi-Fi and test wireless at the same time? Yes. Yes, you can. And now here's the thing. What you would want to do, what I would do in that case, is I would connect the EtherScope nXG using the wireless management port to the internet. Come in and remote into it through the Wi-Fi management port. Then you could use the wired or the Wi-Fi port, the test port, to go in and do all your testing and everything. That's going to give you your most in-depth view. So I'd connect via the wireless management port, and I'll tell you, it's back up, we'll connect back into it. But I just want to say real quick, we did that. In fact, what we did, we ran Zoom on the EtherScope nXG. We loaded the Zoom client, and we hooked to the camera. So the tech at the remote site was aiming the EtherScope around with the camera, and we could see that in Zoom. We were connected in through Link Live and looking at the screen, and we could drive the screen. So it made it incredibly easy to do that remote troubleshooting for Wi-Fi, because they could roam around the facility and we were seeing what they were seeing. The only thing I was missing was my VR headset I have sitting over there. That would have been totally cool for that. So before I bring up the EtherScope, let me just see. Is there any option to import MIB files? There is not. But here, I'm going to tell you a secret about the Discovery. The Discovery engine in here has been in the works since the 90s. Back before I even started teaching all of this, and I was a client. The MIBs have been refined and refined. I have called in, we've sent in MIBs. So what you're going to find is that the MIBs that are in there are going to cover a massive number of devices. This is the Discovery engine's been something that's been worked on for a very long time. So let me bring that EtherScope NXG back up again here. I'll drag that over here. Put that back. Okay, so let's make sure we're connected. And just to reiterate, anytime we want to use the network port on the top, be it the copper or the fiber port, we must come in and run an auto test. And that little chain link right there tells me that that port is linked to the network. And I can have both the copper and the Wi-Fi ports connected at the same time, but during Discovery, we want that Wi-Fi port scanning up there. Okay, so we're going to go back. Let me get this so it's on the screen a little bit better. I'll use that. We'll go back. We're going to go to Discovery. Now, look at that. We've got names for everything. Why? Because I gave these names and I saved it as the auth name or .text file. And now I have names to go with it. This is name, authorization, and MAC address. If we have time, I'll bring up what that file looks like. You could create that file if you know the MAC addresses of everything. But now, everything has names. So if I come in and I go filter and I go authorization, I've got 73 authorized devices. Now I'm down to 12. So let's look at those 12. And so I've got 178 up there. That's my OnePlus phone. I could add that in. I've got a few other devices, but here's the thing. If they don't have a MAC address, we can't put them in the auth name file. So we've got some devices that are off the network. Okay? So we have gone in, we've done our discovery. Now, let's take that discovery, keep going back too far, and I'm going to come into my three little dots in the upper corner, and I'm going to upload this to Link Live. Now, I've claimed my EtherScope NXG to Link Live, so I upload it. So now, let's bounce over here. We're going to sign into Link Live. We'll maximize that. Now, if I come in here to my analysis files, and I zoom in just a little bit, we see that here's our discovery right there, 9:33 a.m., 10/13/21, that's today. Now, that is linked to a Wi-Fi discovery as well. So what happened when I took my discovery and I shoved it up to Link Live? It took what it discovered doing our discovery, and it took what everything Wi-Fi discovered, it put those together and uploaded those. So now I can come in and I can add labels. I can put that into a folder. I should have gotten rid of that folder. I've got a job comment set in there. We could touch on that later if we want. But this tells me a little bit about my discovery. It tells me I did my discovery. So when the discovery was run, the unit that was running it. So now let's come over here, and we're going to look at just absolutely the coolest thing here, and that's topology. So once we upload this into Link Live, what it does is it comes in and it puts together that map of my network. And because it discovered on both the wired side and the wireless side, we see that here is the AP out here in the studio. So I can see that I've got, there's the living room light is connected to that. The right, let's see, there's that light, there's that device, there's the washer. So I mean, these are all the different devices. There's the dryer, there's the TV out here, there's the Amazon Echo, the floor lamp, TV. So now I can see I've got Wi-Fi power strips out here for turning all the lights off and on. So I can see all the devices that are connected out there. In fact, I can even see that my EtherScope NXG is attached via the management Wi-Fi port to that AP up there. So when I first ran this, when I ran this not long ago here, what I discovered is that devices were connecting to like the upstairs AP. Really? The lights out here were connecting up to a different AP. So it starts giving me a view of where do I have devices that are connected that maybe aren't connected where I want them. I could come up here and I could do things like, for devices, I can show the name, the MAC address, the IP address. For wireless devices, I could say, show me what SSID they're on. And for wired devices, I could say, show me what port they're on. So now, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it to, I'm going to hide unconnected devices. So I've got neighbors around here, and I pick up their wireless networks. It really freaks them out when I tell them there's problems with their wireless network, so I stopped doing that. But what we find is that we pick up a lot of other devices that may not be part of our network. So one of the things I like to do is hide unconnected devices. And so what that'll do is that gets rid of any device that isn't connected to my network. That kind of cleans things up. Also, I can turn on manual placement. You may have noticed that when I came in and I drug a device around, let's see if we can get over here. When I drug a device around, it kind of bounced back. Well, in this case now, with manual placement, I can start dragging these around. So I can move them out there a little bit further. I can put them where I want to. So now I've got a map of my network, and anybody that is a member of my Link Live organization can see this map. So let's say that you were to say, Mike, I have a network problem. I want to bring you in and have you help me figure out this problem. I can say, okay, well, why don't I join, why don't you send me an invite to your Link Live organization. Link Live is free. And you can come in and you can take a look at what's going on in there. So I can start seeing what's happening out here with these different devices. Okay? I can drill into a device. Watch this. We're going to go to the box fan. If I double click on the box fan, it now tells me, here's the channel it's on, here's the AP info, here's the nearest AP. I can hit close. So now we can start doing that. And I've got myself in a pickle here because the zoom on the web page and the zoom, it kind of gets stuck, so I had to go back. I got to go back in there again. We can filter. So let's go back to SSID, let's go back to port, let's go back to manual placement, let's go back to hide unconnected devices. So now I can come up here and filter. I can filter on device types, I can filter on SSIDs, IP subnets, so I can whittle this down to a particular network that I might be interested in. I could say again, show me just my studio network here. So I can select that and hit apply, and now it's giving me a view of just that studio network and how things are interconnected there. I can get rid of everything I don't care about. I can't tell you how many times when it's come to network documentation that people that have been having problems go, they start looking at it, they go, whoa, wait a second. There's 2 times I hear the S word, that's should, and that is should, that should be connected there. And the other one is that shouldn't be connected there. And so as we start drilling in here and we take a look at how things are connected, we see that right here, we've kind of got this loop going right there. Well, maybe that shouldn't be connected that way. Here is the switch I have sitting on the bench right here. We can see what's going on with that. Now, I can come down and I can do a few things with this. And this is where we can really do some neat reporting. We can create a template. So let's say that I really am happy with this setup that we've got there. So I can say I want to add a template. And what we see with this template is it shows that the filter right here is on the 10.0.11 subnet. So I can save how I've got my labeling set up. I can save my filters, and we could say demo template. We'll say studio. I'll say studio network, and I'll hit save. So now, anytime I go back in and look at a topology map, I could come in and let's unload that filter. I can come in here and I could say browse templates, and there is my studio net, and I could say apply. And it will apply that template to that topology map. So now instantly I'm able to see that view of what's going on out there. I can also come in and I could export this to Visio. I can export it to an SVG. Now you go, SVG, what is that? It is a vector graphic that can be opened with a web browser. So I can take this, I can save this as an SVG, put it on a web page, and use that for network documentation. So my topology gives me a really clear view of what's going on with my network. I can double click on any device to get detailed information about that device. Now we're going to go back and we're going to go to, in fact, before we do this, let me turn on a few devices here. So I'm going to restart my discovery. I'm going to refresh, here, let me do this. I want to show you this. So we're going to double click. We're going to go to refresh discovery. We're going to clear and rerun our discovery. Okay, so it's going to start the discovery over again. I am going to crank up a number of devices here. Let me just hit the power buttons on all those. Okay, so those are going to fire up over there. I want to show you the discovery difference. And the discovery difference is where I can take 2 discoveries and compare them to see what's changed on those discoveries. So let's come back here. So in addition to the map, I get my analysis. And my analysis shows me detailed information about each one of my devices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on device type. I'm going to say show me my switches. Let's see. Oh. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Got network tools, got my unknown switches. Now let's grab a switch. So here's a switch. I can go to my interfaces. This shows me each one of the interfaces on there. It shows me who's connected to each interface and what VLAN it's on. So again, I grabbed this information from this EtherScope NXG that's sitting out at this remote site. I've now saved it. And come on, if you've been running networks for any period of time, you know that things don't just break. Things change. So now we've taken a snapshot of what it looks like. We know what VLAN everything's on. How many times have you had to log into a switch to figure out what VLAN the port's on? Where you plug something in, it's on the wrong VLAN. Here, we could go in, this is a snapshot, we could come into that switch and we could see which VLANs each of our different ports are on. That's pretty handy. Okay. So we go in there, we could see our address information for that. So we could look at each one of our devices in there. If I come back here, I take a look at my Wi-Fi information that was collected. I can go to my Wi-Fi analysis and I can see all of the different channels, how many devices I have on each channel, how many APs, all of that. This is all collected and I can generate a PDF or, even better, a CSV file on all this. If I come down here and I generate my CSV file, I can now bring that into Excel, import it into a database, etc. Now, we reran our discovery. So we see that we've now got 100 devices on our network. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this discovery to Link Live. I'll save that to analysis files. Okay. So now I've got a discovery that I did right here at 9:33, and I've got one that I did at 9:46. So I'm going to select this discovery, and I'm going to say create a discovery difference. And now I'm going to select another discovery. And I'll create a discovery difference, and I'll say demo difference. I'll say generate. So what Link Live is doing is it's taking these two discoveries and it's comparing them. So here's my discovery difference. So what we find is that we have 4 missing devices. We have 15 new devices. So if I come over here and I go to my topology, and we drill into our topology right here. Got to slow that down enough that I don't make everyone get motion sickness here. But right there, the yellow devices are devices that are missing. Let me find where our new devices are here. There's our upstairs AP. Oops. Well, we could do a filter. We can make it easier. I can say a filter. I could say differences. I could say show me the new devices on the network. Now, we may not have given it enough time for it to find the switch where all these devices are connected. Normally, I would let that discovery run for a little longer period of time. But what we see, if we zoom in here, let's find one of those. There's that. Here are all the devices that I added. So sometimes we have to give it a little bit of time so it has time to get through all of the switch bridge forwarding tables and pull that information. But this gives us a view of what that discovery difference is. In fact, if we come down here and we look at this one, here I have 40 new devices. So we could look at the topology. And we can start seeing all the devices that are new and all the devices that are missing. So this starts giving us a really good view of what we have going on our network. No more should. That should be connected here, that should be connected there. We are able to use the EtherScope nXG to do that discovery. Now, what I will show you is I'm going to disconnect from VNC here. I'm going to go out to devices. I'm going to go to my EtherScope nXG I'm going to hit remote. This is where I can bring up that remote interface. This allows me to go in and remote control my EtherScope nXG from anywhere. All I need is a web browser. So I could take my EtherScope nXG. I can put it in a case. In fact, I made this case so that I've got my EtherScope nXG, I've got some cables, and I've got a Link Runner G2, or I could put a Link Runner 10G in there. And I can take those, I can put a label on that and send it out somewhere. They plug it in. I don't have to VPN into their network. All I have to do is bring up the remote interface here. We can do a discovery. We can upload it into Link Live. We can start analyzing it and generate documentation. So let me take a look at questions here. Is a trunk port or access port good for discovery? It just needs to be an access port, but it needs to be a port that can get to all of your subnets. Right? You don't have to be on the same layer 2 broadcast domain to do discovery, because what we're doing, this is the cool thing with the discovery, it is using the ARP caches from routers. Because I can go out to a remote network and get IP addresses, and I can get names from NetBIOS, MDNS, DNS, Snmp. I can get the IP. But if I want to figure out what switch port it's attached to, I need the MAC address. Well, where do we have an IP to MAC address correlation? It's in the ARP cache. So we go to the Snmp table on the router at that remote site, and we grab the ARP cache. So now I have name to IP, IP to MAC. Then I go to the switches and I get the bridge forwarding table. And that gives me MAC to port. And this is how I can start whittling it down to exactly where a particular device is. In fact, I could say that for the Office printer right here, if I were to click on that, and I were to go to Tools, and I did a path analysis, what this will do is this will trace a path from the EtherScope nXG to that printer at layer 2 through the network. It tells me how I'm connected through each one of my switches. So it says I come in port 5 out 1, in 3 out 1. I go into my primary router. I go in and it shows me all of my entire path I take to get there. I'm doing all this remotely. So I don't have to hop on a plane and fly out there. I can put the EtherScope nXG in a box and let it do the traveling. And I can connect out, I can see what's going on the wired network, on the wireless network. So this is just one of the many tools that we've got out there. Now what I'm going to do is in the chat window here, let me open the chat window. I'm going to put a link to a YouTube event that's coming up this afternoon. That's 1 p.m. Pacific time. So at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I'm going to do a little stream, video stream to LinkedIn and YouTube with James Kokoska. James is the NetAlly Chief Technology Officer, and you know, it's James' fingers and probably code in a lot of places are in all over this tool. James is a driving factor in there in all of these different tools that we've seen. And what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about LANBERT. LANBERT allows us to do throughput test or qualification testing of media. So we're going to look at how we can do things like test a Cat5e link to make sure it'll support 5G base T. And the neat thing is how we can do this testing to test a variety of even more complex links. So James and I are going to be chatting. It's going to be very back and forth. We have a lot of fun every time we get together. So if you have some time, YouTube, LinkedIn, it's going to be out there. So what I want to do is I want to make sure, let me come in here, and You'll see that Casey, in setting up this event, has put out a number of handouts. We've got some handouts on the data sheet for the NXG, corporate brochure, air mapper, site survey information. So I want to make sure that if you want to check out any of those handouts, that you download those. Let's see. I'm just reading through some of these real quick. So sometimes we see devices without connector lines. Some are neighbor devices, and some appear local. Is this due to switches not having Snmp? What you may have noticed, and I'm going to close this window right here. What you may have noticed is sometimes we will see unknown switch. If you're doing a discovery, you'll see unknown switch. So the EtherScope NXG is smart enough to know that if it sees a switch port, and that switch port has 5 devices on it, no amount of soldering, if you saw some of the stuff I built over the years, you'd know that I may have even tried this. No amount of soldering or hooking things together, I can't twist 5 Ethernet cables together and plug them into devices. There's got to be a switch in there. And if we see an unknown switch, it's because we don't have the Snmp community string for it, because it's unmanaged, but that is why. So there are times where I've had to rerun discovery a few times. I've had to, we kind of have to really get it to get in there and get those bridge forwarding tables and make sure the device is in the bridge forwarding table. If we don't talk to a device for a while, that CAM, if we go back to Cisco days, that bridge forwarding entry may time out of the table. And we can only tell where something's connected by seeing it's in the table. So to discover a device, we have to see that it's in the table. And where we can run into issues is if for some reason that device doesn't respond to a ping. I may send a ping to it, but I don't get a response back, and that may not appear in the bridge forwarding table, then we can't discover where it's at. So that's why I found that the longer I let discovery run, and maybe even I refresh it a few times, I can pick up where those devices, because it won't delete anything that it already had in its table, but it will add new devices that it finds in there. So that's been one of those little tricks that I've needed to do to get that to discover. Let me come back here. Locate. So in locating Wi-Fi devices, let's, and we've got just about 3 minutes. I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. So I am going to come back in. We're going to talk about locate real quick because there was a question about that. So if I bring my EtherScope NXG over here and I say, I go to Wi-Fi and I go to, I'm going to just use the touch screen. I am so much faster with that. And I go to clients and I say, we've got this client out here and we want to locate that client. How about the iRobot? We want to figure out where the iRobot is. It's not, I can't find it in the house. Where is it? So I could come in and I could say locate. Now what's going to happen is we are only going to see a signal from that thing when it transmits every once in a while, which could be very rarely. It's when it goes up to the mothership or something. So what I can do is I can come into my tools. And, well, actually, in this case, I can come in here. I'm going to go into the iRobot, and I'm going to go to ping. Now, James, they did a good job with this one. We could come in and we could say we're going to ping that device. And I can go into my settings and I can say interval. Instead of once a second, I can ping it 10 times a second. So we're going to come back and we're going to start pinging that device. Now, we're going to come out and ping is running in the background. Now I'm going to go into locate. And so what's happening is we're pinging this device. And what we expect to see on here is that we are now receiving a signal. Let's see, let me make sure I'm pinging the right device like I said. There's our pings. There we go. Yep. It could be we're far enough away from it that we're not picking the signal up here. But by sending pings 10 times a second, I can solicit ping replies from that device, make it send those out, and it's going to be able to. So what I could do is I can now start walking around and see if I could find that device. Okay? All right. So there's a question about key devices. Can we have it do key device monitoring? If you had an OptiView XG in the past and you say, hey, I want to do that same key device monitoring, what we can do is we can have it run the auto test periodically. So we can have it rerun the auto test, and within the auto test, we can come out here and I can have it check connectivity on devices. So kind of like that, but not exactly the same. All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me today on this webinar on the art of discovery. I hope that you found it interesting, informative, maybe a little bit fun. It was fun for me. And this session's been recorded. It'll be up there at some point, so you can watch it later if you go, man, I need to go back and listen to some more of Mike. You have that YouTube link. Come join me this afternoon and we'll talk with James Kokoska. So thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you in a future webinar.